All right, welcome everyone. It is 12:01, so we want to get started here. We have a lot of content to cover today, and we'll be welcoming people as they are able to join us. So thank you so much for being here and spending your lunch hour with us. My name is Laura Weiss, and I am a program director here with the Maryland State Arts Council, and I am joined by my colleague, co-program director, Emily Sollenberger. Again, thank you so much for being here. Please note that this session is being recorded, so we are recording that and we will share it to our website in the next couple of days. So we are here today to talk about the FY24 how to apply for independent artists for the Creativity Grant Program. So we're specifically looking at the Creativity Grant as it pertains to independent artists today. The next couple of slides, these are just some informational slides. In case you are not familiar with Google Meet, this is just a reference shot of where all of the buttons and things are. A couple to point out are your microphone, which is down towards the lower left hand of your screen, and also your camera. You can feel free to be on or off camera, however you are comfortable, but please do remain on mute unless, of course, you are speaking. We do have closed captions that are available. It's the little CC in a box down towards the bottom. Those are available for you. They are computer generated, just so you are aware. There's also the chat function, which is kind of towards the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We can feel free to utilize that. Emily's probably going to be dropping a couple of chats or a couple of links in there in a couple of moments for you. And we can also utilize that later on once we get to our question and answer session as well. The next couple of slides I'm going to read out loud. We begin all of our public meetings with these slides. I'm just going to switch screens real quick because I cannot quite see all of the screen there. There we go. So I'm going to read, first is our land acknowledgement statement. And that is that we acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Accohonic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Choptico Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nassau-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. The next slide is our equity and justice statement, and that is that the arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across our communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination, regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. The vision of the Maryland State Arts Council is to play an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And we do that through our mission, which is to advance the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all of the people of Maryland. We're currently operating under a strategic plan that was adopted in 2019. We're actually at the very end of that strategic plan. And out of that plan came 5 specific goals. And those goals are to increase participation, provide intentional support, build capacity, leverage connections, and bolster Maryland arts. And sessions like today are really honing in on that goal 2, which is to provide intentional support. Additionally, we begin all of our meetings with what we call our creative meeting actions. These are just ideas to keep in the back of your mind as we go through today's presentation and conversation. And that is to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements, focus your language on the task at hand. Hold one another accountable with care. Apply yes and I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it. And balance speaking and listening. This is just a little bit of an advertisement, if you will, for some of our professional development opportunities. You're probably familiar with our Eventbrite page since you registered for today's session through that, but we do encourage you to check that out as there are lots of different sessions being added. We're starting to gear up into our fall season, so things are starting to pick up there. But we have lots of different webinars and other offerings that are available, including our Coffee with the Council sessions, which happen on Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock. Usually that happens about twice a month. We have a lot of these different how to apply sessions coming up for all of the different programs that we offer. And we also have regional office hours, which they usually happen on the first Thursdays of the month. Some of our staff go out into the field to meet with individuals. We go throughout the entire state. So the next one is coming up on September the 7th when we will be in, I believe it's Calvert County. We're going down to Southern Maryland. So make sure to come visit us if you happen to be in that area. And also just something to call out is that we're always looking for individuals to get involved with our different processes. And that often involves our calls for panelists. We're lots of times looking for panelists to be a part of our programs. If you're interested in perhaps serving as a panelist, visit our Ways to Get Involved page on our website. It's really a wonderful opportunity to experience the grant making process from the other side of the table, if you will. You would review applications, you would be scoring different applications using rubrics, you would work with program staff to go through that review process. I do believe that we have perhaps a panelist call, or maybe it is an editor call that is currently listed, but check it out if that's something that you're interested in. And it has details on how to apply on that website, which Emily just put the link in the chat for you. All right, to jump into the meat of today's meeting, we're here to talk about the Creativity Grant Program, which is a program that Emily and I oversee together. We're going to go through several different topics today. First, we're going to review the program and its guidelines. Then we're going to talk about the application itself. And specifically today, we are looking at the project-specific support that's available for independent artists. While we go through that application, we're also going to talk about some helpful hints and tips for the best way to make a successful application. We'll talk about the monthly review process and what that entails. And we're also going to go through just a brief overview of Smart Simple, which is our grants platform that we use. And then we're going to end hopefully with plenty of time for questions and answers so that we can help out with anything further that you might have questions about. We are going to ask that you hold your questions until that Q&A time towards the end. We want to make sure that we get through all of the content first, and then we're happy to talk through any questions. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Emily to talk about the overview of the program.
Great, thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again so much for being here during your lunch hour, perhaps. But we've got a great group, and as Laura mentioned, we're going to be going through quite a bit of content. So some of your answers that, or some of your questions that might come up throughout today's presentation may get answered throughout, but do get a piece of paper or something to write your questions as they come up, and we can hopefully get to them at the end. I'll also note that I did drop some links in the chat box, so if you have a chance to grab some of those based on the information Laura shared. But to get started, we're going to go over just an overview of the Creativity Grant before we jump into the application itself. So the purpose of the Creativity Grant is to support the activities and general operations for independent artists and organizations throughout the state. So today we're going to focus specifically on independent artists, so our project-based support through the Creativity Grant. But ultimately, we're looking to strengthen the vitality and sustainability of artists and small organizations across the state of Maryland to ensure that strong and stable arts infrastructure. This program also serves the growing needs of relevant art projects and collaborations within our Maryland communities. So here's some of the basics. You're going to hear some of these things multiple times, but here's a quick overview to get us started. So the funding for the Creativity Grant is up to $4,000 per application. Again, it's available to independent artists and organizations. We're going to talk about our independent artists today, but there are 2 tracks for the Creativity Grant, and that is really for our organizations to either choose general operating support or project-based. However, for our independent artists, you would just be choosing that project-based support as your track. Within that track application, you will have 3 questions that you will answer as part of the application, and we'll get to those a little bit later. The applications are accepted on a rolling basis throughout the year, and they're reviewed monthly. This year for FY24, we are planning to take a break at the end of the fiscal year, so we'll stop accepting applications after the May review period and have a break for June. You can find those details in the guidelines as well, but ultimately accepted on a rolling basis. And you're eligible to receive 1 Creativity Grant per fiscal year. So when we say fiscal year, we're talking about July 1st through June 30th. And so we're currently in FY24. So we just started our fiscal year last month and ends June 30 of FY24 of 2024. Okay, so who can apply? So our independent artists, and we determine that independent artists are folks that are making work without affiliation to an organization. So you're independent of work you might be doing with an institution or an organization. Must be a Maryland resident, 18 years of age or older. You cannot be enrolled in high school, undergrad, or graduate degree programs. So we're looking for folks that are outside of their education here. We're looking for folks that are proposing projects and activities that are taking place in the state of Maryland. And only 1 application per project would be considered. So if you're somebody who's working collaboratively with somebody, we would just be looking to support 1 application. While there might be multiple people named in that application, you can't submit 2 separate applications for the same project, just 1 project application. Okay, so what can the Creativity Grant support? It essentially can support any expenses that are directly associated with your proposed arts activities. So that might include artist fees or stipends, fees for consultants that you might be working with or hiring, any types of marketing or promotional efforts, materials and supplies that are connected to your activities, a space rental, or if you're looking to rent a venue, those sorts of things. Equipment, as long as it's equipment that is connected to the activity itself. So we're thinking about non-capital. So something that, for example, if you need some sort of technology, a printer, or to purchase some sort of equipment for you to be able to conduct those activities in community, that would be great. But we wouldn't be able to say, renovate your studio. That would be capital. And with that in mind, what the creativity cannot support would be regranting efforts or scholarships. Again, those capital improvements or permanent equipment, activities that are not open to the public. So we're looking at at supporting things that are happening in community that would be accessible to the community. It cannot support activities that are primarily therapeutic, travel outside of the state. It cannot support day-to-day expenses associated with our for-profit businesses. So if you have an LLC, an S Corp, C Corp, those sorts of for-profit businesses, we can't support those general operations for those companies. And with all State Arts Council grants, the funds cannot be used for political contributions, lobbying activities. And if you're not sure, just ask Laura or myself, and we'd be happy to help clarify. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the creativity grant for independent artists, you would be choosing project-based support. Again, there's 3 narrative questions for the application. They're generally the same. So if there are folks that are representing organizations and you might be applying for an organization, you know, the questions are very much similar, but it's kind of looking at that either broad scope or very specific scope. So for these purposes, for independent artists, we're looking at that very specific project-based scope when it comes to the narrative questions. For our organizations out there, we'd also be looking for you to upload a financial statement, but again, not needed for independent artists applying. Okay. So we're going to jump into the application questions themselves. So again, this is the first of 3 questions. We also have resources on our website that we'll be posting. So there's a rubric that's on well, it's already there, isn't it? Yeah. There's a rubric on the Creativity Grant website. So we pulled this direct language from that rubric that has the application question, and then it also has what an excellent to outstanding response might be for that particular question. So for this one, the first question for the Creativity Grant is really looking at that big picture of what your activities, events, projects are. So we're asking for you to describe your proposed arts activity, event, or project, and the geographic area the project will serve. Within your response, include a detailed description of the proposed project, including the planned community engagement and intended impact of the arts activity. So what we'd be looking for in an excellent to outstanding response, that it includes clear, specific, and thorough explanation of the artist's proposed activities, event, or project, which includes a clear and thorough evidence of intended community impact, including engagement, intention, timeliness, and or the inspiration in relation to the defined community needs. So that is the first question here. And we thought it would be helpful to give some helpful hints in between these things as well. So a helpful hint to consider when you're applying for the Creativity Grant in general, and specifically this first question, is really to describe the activity with those details of the who, what, when, where, and why within that narrative. We also recommend that you approach the narrative as if the reader has no idea what you're proposing. So give them a full picture of who you are, what you're doing, what you're hoping to do, who your community is, and why you're doing what you're doing. Another useful exercise we also recommend for folks, especially if you're a first-time grant writer or if it's something that you're not doing on a regular basis, to have a trusted friend, family member, colleague, somebody who knows, again, not very much about what you're doing, and to read through your draft application, to have them poke holes, if you will, in it, fill in the blanks where there might be things that are unclear. So just some helpful hints as you're kind of starting off with this particular grant. The next application question is around the timeline of your activities. So we're asking that you describe the timeline of your proposed arts activity, and within the response, include a detailed schedule of the project, including specific timing as it relates to the steps of the planning, promotional efforts, expenditure of funds, implementation, and execution of the events, activities, and evaluation. And you'll see below in italics what an excellent to outstanding response would include. And again, we're looking for a clear, specific, and realistic timeline, just demonstrating a realistic schedule, including that specific timing as it relates to expenditure of funds, planning, promotional efforts, implementation of the events and activities, and evaluation. So everything from the start of that ideation phase all the way through implementation and execution. And helpful hint for the timeline here is to include a full timeline and schedule of that entirety of the project, as mentioned, from beginning to end. What we like to use kind of as a helpful way to organize your timeline is to consider a weekly or a monthly listing or some other time increment that makes sense for your project, with specific dates and timeframes that share all the steps of the process for conducting your activities. So include all the steps from that planning, implementation, execution, and evaluation of the project. So for example, you might say you're starting in January with your planning. You might, start your timeline with January, ABC happens, February, XYZ happens, and so on and so forth. It just helps with organizing and thinking more step by step, chronologically, if you will. Okay, and the third and final question for the project-specific application is all around the budget. So we're asking that you describe the overall budget for your proposed project. And within your response, include a clear listing of all projected expenses for the project, sources of income beyond what the State Arts Council request is, and how much State Arts Council funding would be used. So an excellent to outstanding response would include clear, detailed, and realistic financial plan for income and expenses tied to the proposed project. And our helpful hint for the budget section is to include a clear list that shows specific line items for all the planned income and expenses, and a description of how you got to that total. So for example, if you're thinking about including an artist fee in your budget, say it's $500, for example, you may consider including how you got to that $500. Is it an hourly rate? Is it maybe a flat rate that you decided upon? Kind of how did you get to that point? And consider those types of more detailed steps as you're thinking about your budget. So essentially, how did you get to where you got here in your expenses? And the response must be within the context of the narrative, and attachments for budgets and financials. Anything else that is not part of the application itself would not be considered. So just make sure you have all those details within the narrative box rather than thinking about an attachment, because that's not going to be looked at. Okay, so those are the three main questions that you'd be completing. In addition to the questions themselves, you would be required to attach a W-9 form that just helps with our processes to ensure that when you are funded, and hopefully that's the case, that we can get payment out to you quicker by having that W-9 already in place, along with an electronic signature that basically ensures that you're agreeing that everything is true and valid within your application. And for our organizations out there, a financial statement is also required, but again, only for organizations, not for our independent artists. And as I mentioned earlier, the full application and scoring rubric can be found at the State Arts Council's website when you click on the Creativity Grant. So here's kind of a snapshot of what that looks like. So you'll see the question would be at the top and the scoring rubric right below that question. Okay, so that's a lot about the application itself. And again, we'll hold for questions at the end in case something came up for you. But I'm going to pass it back over to Laura to go into more logistics.
Thank you so much, Emily. So we're going to just go through some of the logistics of the actual application process now. We've mentioned it a few times now, but just to say it again, the Creativity Grant is available for up to $4,000. It used to be $3,500. We're up to $4,000 now, so that's exciting. That you are eligible to receive one grant per fiscal year. And just to reiterate what that fiscal year is, that is July 1 through June 30. We're currently in FY24. Sometimes we get questions about, could I be awarded a portion of the grant or something like that? Creativity grants are what I'm going to call an all or none grant. So that means that if you are approved for that grant, you will receive the amount that you requested. We don't offer percentages or portions or anything like that. So if you ask for $4,000 and you are approved and awarded, then you will be granted the $4,000. So just something to think about as you prepare your application and think about what your request amount is. This is something to highlight. This is new. If you've done creativity grants before and you kind of have the monthly cycle in your head, things have changed a little bit for this year. So as we've said a couple of times, applications are accepted on a rolling basis. So that means that you can click submit whenever you are ready, and they are then reviewed and awarded on a monthly basis. Creativity grant applications submitted by the last day of the month will be reviewed by the panel in the following month, with notifications then following the early of the next month. So it used to be that we batched applications from the 6th of one month to the 5th of the following month. That's no longer happening. We're just batching by the month. It's just a little bit easier, to communicate. It's easier on the back end of things. And it gives us a little bit of a different schedule just in our grants office and processing. So what that looks like is if you were to submit an application in the month of August, so anytime between August 1st and August 31st, that means that application will be reviewed in September, and then those notifications are sent out by early October. And then it just rinse and repeat. So if you submit in September, it will be reviewed in October, notifications by early November. All of this is outlined in the guidelines, but we know that some people have applied multiple times before in the past, have received grants in the past. So we want to make sure that this is highlighted, that this is different for this year. Another difference for this year is that all applications are now reviewed by panelists. In the past, if you were requesting $2,000 or less, your application was reviewed by staff. Now all applications are going to the panel, and that's just for more consistency and to make sure that the panel is really, they're the ones that are reviewing all applications moving forward. The Creativity Grant Program, just so you're aware, has a total of 15 panelists this year. Generally, how it works is we are activating 2 groups of 5 panelists to review the applications. So we split the applications into batches, and then your application would be reviewed and scored by a group of 5 panelists. So just so you're aware of how many people are reading and scoring your application, that's how it works. Some information on how notifications work. So if you are awarded, you get that email. It will be something that is auto-generated from Smart Simple. So you would receive that again by the early end of the month. Just things to be aware of is that you're only eligible for that one creativity grant per fiscal year. So once you've been awarded in the FY24 cycle, that means that you can no longer apply for or receive a creativity application until the FY25 cycle opens. Once you receive that notification saying that you've been awarded, then you must sign and return your grant agreement form via Smart Simple. This is a really important step because we have to have a signed grant agreement to move things forward to get the payment to you. So make sure that that is something that you are aware of. And it's also important to know that payment takes approximately 6 to 8 weeks from the date of the receipt of the fully executed grant agreement form. So again, another reason to get that grant agreement form in as soon as possible if you are awarded. We don't want to hold up the payment process in any way. Again, if you are awarded, there would be a final report associated with your funding. So that's something to be aware of. Again, we've changed the structure a little bit for this year just to make things a little bit easier. So if you have an application, an FY24 application that was submitted between June of 2023 and December of 2023, you would have a final report deadline of August 15th, 2024. So basically this time next year. Applications that are submitted between January of 2024 and April of 2024, that's the last point that you can apply for FY24 funding, you would have a final report deadline of December 31st, 2024. So it's just giving a bit more time since there are these rolling deadlines. We want to make sure that you can receive your funding, use your funding before the final report deadline comes around. So those are some important things to know about. Grantees agree to spend or obligate all of their funds by their assigned final report date. That means that the funds need to be expended, encumbered, or otherwise legally committed to be used such that returning the unspent funds would cause the grantee legal harm. So you want to make sure that you are using the funds or they're otherwise encumbered for use before the final report deadline. So if you receive a notification that unfortunately you're not awarded, we do really encourage you to try again. Something to note is that this is an extremely popular and therefore competitive program. So don't give up. There are so many wonderful projects out there, and we simply just can't fund all of them in one given month. So if you're not awarded, please don't be discouraged. Something that we encourage you to do is that you can request feedback from the panelists who reviewed your application. When you receive your notification saying that you are unfortunately not awarded in that particular month, there'll be a link in that notification that you can fill out a form requesting this feedback. Emily and I go through that. We gather the comments and the questions and the recommendations that the panelists have, and we'll send that to you as a written document. So you can go through and edit your application and reapply. You can absolutely reapply. So that's something that we hope, can help you as you're working through to improve your application for future submissions. All right, with all of that information in mind, Emily and I get a lot of questions, and these are some that we kind of see over and over again. So we wanted to bring them up as some FAQs. Certainly not every single question that we get, but these are some important things to know and might apply to what you're thinking about in your application. So the first is that my project is still in the early planning stage. Can I still apply? Our thoughts here are possibly, you might be able to. We do recommend that you look at the application and the rubric clearly and carefully. As Emily walked through that application, you probably saw that a lot of the scoring is based on very specific details and thorough descriptions. So if you're still in the early stages and you don't really have those details ready yet, then you might consider waiting until there's really a more concrete vision or plan that's ready to present. And of course, you can always reach out to myself or to Emily to talk about where you are in that project and when it makes sense for you to apply. Another question that we often see is, I'm looking for funding to support living expenses and I don't have a specific project in mind. Can I apply for a creativity grant? The answer here is no. A creativity grant is intended for project-specific support. So we're really looking for that specific project, event, program, something that you're working on that has a beginning, middle, and end. An application really has to have those details that are specific to a project to be considered eligible. If you are an artist that's looking for support for those day-to-day expenses, you know, which might be rent, which might be groceries, which might be medical expenses, what have you, then we do recommend that you look at a different program, which is called our Grants for Artists program. This was something that we piloted last year. It was brand new and it was extremely popular. It's not currently open, but it is scheduled to reopen later in the fiscal year. So do be on the lookout for that if you're looking for those type of expenses and that type of support. Another question that we see frequently is that your project has received previous creativity funding. Can you apply again in a new fiscal year? This is a nuanced one, and it does depend. A project itself can only be funded once. However, sometimes we see, especially in large scale programs, that there might be different phases of a project or different iterations of a project where future funding might be possible if the grant would clearly support a different set of expenses for a different part of the project. So this is one that we would really encourage you to reach out to myself or to Emily to talk about, just to verify that eligibility. We don't want you to go through a whole application, write everything out, and then find out that it's not actually eligible. So reach out to us if you have questions, if you've received funding before. Another question that we often see is, I'm eligible and applying to the professional development grant, which is another one of our monthly grant programs. Can I also apply for creativity in the same month? The answer here is yes. You can absolutely apply to receive multiple grants in the same month and in the same fiscal year. Each grant has different goals and purposes to support different needs. So you can absolutely look at, for example, the creativity grant and the professional development grant in the same month. We would just encourage you really take a look through those guidelines to make sure that you're understanding the differences between the programs. And of course, we can help with questions too. Just a few more FAQs here. So this one is, my project is already complete. Can I submit for reimbursement of expenses? The answer here is no. We cannot support reimbursement for previously completed projects. So you must submit an application before this completion of a project for it to be considered eligible. So we're looking at things that are in progress or happening in the future. We can't look back. We can't reimburse, unfortunately. I would like the grant to cover expenses associated with bringing a non-Maryland artist to Maryland. Is this allowed? Again, this is kind of on a case-by-case basis, so it might be allowed. If the grant funding would support a non-Maryland artist, it is recommended that you share a clear description as to why this particular non-Maryland artist would bring significant value to your project and to Maryland audiences. So check in again, highly recommend that if this is the case for you and you're looking to use that grant funding for a non-Maryland artist, reach out to myself or to Emily so that way we can talk about talk about if it is eligible before you submit. One more FAQ here. This one we actually see quite a bit. How can I share work samples, letters of support, reviews, other documents such as that? We actually don't look at any of those for the creativity grant. So external documents are not considered as part of the review of the creativity grant applications. Panelists only look at those 3 narrative questions per the scoring criteria. So everything that Emily went through just a few slides ago, those are the only 3 things that are scored. We also want to make sure that you're not including information that's important to your project in links or other documents, because again, they won't be looked at. So make sure that anything you want to communicate with panelists is written out within the context of those 3 narrative questions. We don't want them to miss anything important, so make sure that that's in there. All right, that's a lot of information. So I'm going to hand it over once more to Emily to go through just a couple more things here and to look at Smart Simple, and then we'll open up for questions.
Great, thanks, Laura. And I know this is a ton of information to take in, folks. So again, that's why we're recording, and you can always reach out to us for further questions. Another helpful hint here is that we recommend that you apply early to the creativity grant, as with everything mentioned with, it being a competitive program, allowing time for review and payments and all those things. And if by chance you're declined the first time, you have enough time to then reapply. So just want to make that other reminder there, and that again, the payment process actually takes place outside of the State Arts Council offices. So that's why it takes 6 to 8 weeks, because once it leaves our office, it goes through other state agencies to get that payment out to you. So it goes through a lot of hands before it reaches your mailbox. Okay. Additionally, another reminder that Laura mentioned, that we provide feedback after grants are reviewed, but we can also provide feedback before you submit an application. So if you give us at least 15 business days, that is usually enough time. Laura and I could also review your application draft in connection to the scoring rubric and provide that written feedback to you before you hit that submit button. But just note, we get a lot of requests, so there's kind of this ongoing queue of feedback that we're constantly working through. Okay. All right, so we're going to move into Smart Simple, and then hopefully have some time for some questions. Just to note that all of our applications go through our online grants portal called Smart Simple, and you can access that by going to marylandarts.smartsimple.com. And that link is on every single program page and a couple other places on our website too. If you can't find it, we're here to help. And Laura just also dropped the link into the chat box. So if you've not applied for State Arts Council funds in the past, we'd recommend that you apply or register yourself and get an account set up within Smart Simple when you get a chance. Okay, so again, to register for Smart Simple, you're going to go to the link that we just mentioned, marylandarts.smartsimple.com, and register or log in. You'll see there's a blue register button there towards the bottom left, and that will take you to a screen to register as an independent artist. And you'll just complete the form, contact information, all those details to get your account set up. If you already have an account, you would just log in using your email. Once you have that account set up, you're going to have access to what we call a dashboard, and it'll be under what we call a grantee home screen. So you'll see there's a section at the top that says My Applications. So to find the Creativity Grant application, you're going to click at the number that says Funding Opportunity. So here it says 12. It might be a different number for you on your screen when you log in. But to get to that application, you're going to click the Funding Opportunities. And then from there, you'll see a listing of all the opportunities that may be available to you as an independent artist. Not all may be applicable, but they're open to independent artists in general. You're going to look for the Creativity Grant application, and next to each application, you're going to you'll see an Apply Now button. So just make sure you hit Apply Now next to that Creativity button. And that's going to open up your screen to the actual application. Before you even move forward, you want to click that Save Draft button at the bottom there. This system does not save anything automatically. You have to actively push Save Draft. So if you are somebody who wants to work on something in a system and come back to it, always click that Save Draft button. It's also going to give you full access to the application. So some things won't pop up for you in certain applications until you click that Save Draft. So that's always the first rule of thumb. Click that. When in doubt, click that Save Draft button. And it will take you through all of the application questions, everything we covered today, and then you'll click that blue Submit button once you're ready for us to review it. So I think that's the short and sweet of Smart Simple. So we're going to open it up for questions. We have about 15 minutes. I know there were a few things that were in the chat if we want to start there, but if you have a question, we can use the raise hand feature that's at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're having trouble, just you can always put your question in the chat box or come off of mute. do we want to start with, let's see here. I see Sharon Robinson first. If you want to go ahead and share your question. Hi, Sharon.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to try to jam a couple of questions in here. So it sounds to me like basically it's a community-driven project is what the creativity grant is for, ultimately, as opposed to, say, an artist-driven project.
Yes and no. Yeah, that's it would probably be case by case, but yes, ultimately the goal of the program is to get the arts into our community. So Marylanders have access to the arts. So, ultimately it would likely be something that is artist and community driven, depending on what you're thinking about.
Okay. So how would partnerships with either other nonprofits, I'm calling them partnerships, in a broad sense, or government agencies play into that? So for instance, I'm deeply involved with Pyramid Atlantic, and also with the Mount Rainier Arts Commission. And, they're two sort of logical entities who are very much about community and potential matching funds as well, perhaps. So I'm just trying to kind of get a general sense of, is that kind of thing possible? It would be eligible?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example. We definitely encourage partnership, and, that also speaks to community engagement and impact. If you found a place or partner, collaborator of any sense, if you find that, supporting your community and community needs takes the shape and form of partnerships, that's something you can certainly mention within your application. One thing to be mindful of, and I'm glad you brought this up, there are organizations that the State Arts Council supports with general operating expenses. So Pyramid Atlantic, just being the example that you brought up, they're somebody who received general operating support, so they would not be eligible to receive creativity grant. However, you as an independent artist, if you're making work independent of Pyramid Atlantic and their programs, you can certainly apply to funding through the creativity grant. It might be something that takes place there, but is not Pyramid's program. It might be yours, or you might be, working with them on something outside of their scheduled programming, and that's okay. If it's something where Pyramid is like, well, this is our exhibition series and Sharon's applying for our exhibition series, that's where we'd be like, okay, there might be a little conflict there. Definitely would encourage you to reach out, and I'd be happy to chat with you further about more specifics.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I see Kate McDonald next. Hi, Kate. I see you, but we don't hear you. There you go.
So sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't do all of the allowances for video. So I have two questions, and one is with the budgeting. Can you include that part of it will have to be reserved for paying taxes on that income, or not?
Yeah, that's a great question that also comes up quite frequently. You can certainly include that in your budget as your other general expenses as an artist and working in a project. So honestly, it might feel a little bit better to keep that in mind and use it in the form of an artist fee.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is my first time in Maryland. I came from DC, and DC was a hard no on the tax question. So just wanted to make sure. And my second question is, in terms of grants allotted per month, do you have a kind of a budget for each month? Or is there a baseline for the rubric that above a certain score in the rubric you would grant people?
Yeah, another great question. We have an annual allocation for the Creativity Grant Program. So the way Laura and I work through that, we do have pretty much an equal general amount per month. So we can stick within that. So that way we're not using up all of our funds early in the year, and then at the end of the year, we're left with nothing. So it is kind of a general amount. So we're really looking at scoring, comprehensive scores, and who kind of makes their way to the top, and then depending on our allocation numbers for that month, we award based on the highest percentages.
Thank you very much. Thank you for doing this today.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome to Maryland.
Thank you.
Okay. I see Caroline is next.
Hi. So I just recently graduated with a degree in photography. And so, I'm pretty new to grants. I definitely wish that I had applied to them earlier. So I definitely was looking more for the grants for the artist program. But it's definitely good to know about the community-driven programs. I recently have been trying to get involved with ASMP. And I know that in Baltimore, the organization's kind of dying. And so I was wondering, could we do a community-driven grant for an organization that has existed? And I'm sure that you guys have probably given them operating support, so I don't know if that's a thing. But I just kind of wanted to know ahead of time if you start to connect with these people, if that's a possibility.
Possibly, Caroline, I'd recommend reaching out, because then we can talk more specifics on those organizations that you might be working with, and whether what the strategy might be if it's an organization that doesn't receive support from us already. That might be an avenue that we can connect with them to get them on board to apply for funding, or if it makes sense for you as an independent artist to apply for activities that you're doing, independently of that organization, along with, depending on their, tax status, if they're for-profit or nonprofit, those sorts of things. Yeah, let's connect offline about that.
And the last thing I was going to ask is, you guys said the grants for the artist program would be later in the fiscal year. Do you guys have an idea of usually when that is?
I don't think we have specifically said that quite yet, Caroline. So, so I would say keep an eye out. I think it is scheduled to roll out at some point in the fiscal year, but we don't have the specifics at this moment.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Emily, if it's okay, I'm going to jump in with a couple of the chat questions. I just want to make sure that we're going back and forth between the two. So I'm scrolling back up a little bit from earlier on. Peter, you asked about the therapeutic activities that we mentioned, and that the grant can't be used for activities that are primarily therapeutic in nature. That's really looking specifically at the activity itself. So an example of that might be if there was a music therapy program, for example. That's something that we sometimes see. We can support the artistic components of that, but we cannot support something that would be primarily therapeutic. So if there was if there were therapists that were involved in your project, we couldn't pay for the therapists specifically, but we could look at the musical qualities of it. It is a little bit of there are some nuances to that. So if you do have an activity that is kind of in that therapeutic world, I would recommend reaching out to myself or to Emily so we can talk a little bit more one-on-one. And Teresa asked a little bit about studio space and studio rental expenses. So if you're looking at supporting your studio rent within the context of an application, it would need to really connect directly to the proposed activity. So, I'm just making this up. If the project takes 3 months to complete, and you're talking about specifically the studio being used complete that project, that would have a clear connection to the proposed activity. If it's just kind of a generic studio rental with no specifics to the activity that you're proposing, then we're going to run into some ineligible expenses there. So we would want to make sure that it's really clearly connected to what you're proposing the activity is. And I'm scrolling down just a little bit more here. I see another question from Teresa. If the project in mind will be developed in Maryland, but the right space to exhibit it happens to be in DC, is it still eligible? Unfortunately, no. The activities have to occur in Maryland. We cannot support activities happening outside of Maryland. So unfortunately, no, that one would not be eligible. And a question from Brian, how do I know whether I should apply for a creativity grant as an individual artist or through an organization with which I am affiliated? Brian, this would really depend on the project itself and who would ultimately get the funding. So if it's something that you are driving, it's your project, and you are incurring the expenses and you want to receive the funding, then it would be with you. I'm not sure if you're talking about, an organization that you work for or that it's in partnership with. If an organization were to apply, then the funding is going to the organization itself. So it would be connected to expenses that the organization is incurring. So, again, this might be something that we might want to chat offline, either myself or Emily with you to talk a little bit about your specific scenario. But ultimately, it's really looking at who's going to receive the funding if awarded, and who's kind of driving the project itself. Okay, I think I got everybody. If I missed somebody, please put your hand up or repost it. Okay. I see Caroline has her hand up, but I think that might have been a question from before. So I'm going to go to Sandra. Sandra, are you? Oh, Sandra has left the meeting, so we might have lost Sandra there. We have just a few moments left, so we'll see if Sandra is able to join back. But Batoma, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Is it Fatima? I'm sorry, we're not hearing you if you are speaking.
Laura, it looks like she had a question in the chat too. If the project must be available to the public, but not necessarily contracted as a public art project. So they have a project to do on private property, but at a location that is open to the public. So the first part is no, it doesn't have to necessarily be public art in that realm. We do have other public art funding if that's something that you're working in that realm, but the creativity grant can also cover public art projects, but doesn't necessarily have to be public art. It can be, just about anything that's arts-based activities. And if you're doing work on private property, that is also okay, but as long as, again, it's open to the public. So if you're holding an event or something, ensuring it's not just your friends and neighbors coming to that event in your backyard, but
Hello?
It's open to the public as well.
Hello?
Whoop. Okay, I think
Can you
you
hear
hear
me?
Sandra now. Great.
Ah, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Sandra, if you want
Okay.
to go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, just a quick question. When you say public, my project involves public high schools. So it's public, but it's not public because if you don't have a student in high school, you probably wouldn't be able to view my project. So would I be excluded or included for consideration?
Sure, I can start with this, and Laura, feel free to chime in. Sandra, that's a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up because we didn't really cover that too much.
Yeah.
So when it comes to projects that include students and youth at certain ages, the creativity grant would be looking at, like you mentioned, things that are open to the public to attend. So that might be something in the form of after school programs or summer camps, those sorts of things that would be considered out of school time for the creativity grant. So, even if something is intended for, say, 14 to 18-year-olds, it would have to be open to any 14 or 18-year-old and not just something that happens at one particular school. So we do have arts and education programming that does fund that in-school time.
I
Support.
I probably should talk to you offline because I don't think you understand what the project is. So it's, okay.
Absolutely.
I'm-
Yeah, we definitely
yeah.
encourage folks to reach out to us so we can talk around the specifics. Yeah, because not
Okay.
everything is.
Okay, and one other question. Can the project be monetized? If you were to make money off of it, would that exclude one?
Nope, not necessarily. We understand that there's definitely different sources of income that make a project happen, and earned revenue streams are completely fine. So whether that's a ticket or a fee,
Okay.
you wouldn't be excluded. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Sandra. And we are at 1:01, so just want to be mindful of time here. I see Ross's hand up. So Ross, I don't know if you want to, we can end with your question if you'd like.
Turns out I'm not the only neighbor who crossed the line. Yeah, never thought. Setting boundaries never looked so ridiculous.
Oh, I'm not hearing Ross, so why don't we just
Sure, yeah, thanks. If you're rejected from applying, one
Ralph, I think we lost you there. You cut off.
might be a good place to end since we're
Yeah.
past time.
Ross, if you want, please feel free to email us with your question. Our emails are here on the screen: emily.sollenberger@maryland.gov or laura.weiss@maryland.gov, and we're happy to help with your question. I'm not sure where it was going, but we can definitely help you out with that. All right, well, we are at 1:03. Apologies for going 3 minutes over here, but thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this was helpful for you. We will be posting this recording on our website probably in the next week or so. So there will be a link there, and you can certainly reference it. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any one-on-one questions or if you want to talk any more about your project that you have in mind. But thank you again, and we look forward to hopefully seeing your application.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.